I received the divorce papers while I was still under anesthesia. 12 years of marriage ended while surgeons were removing a tumor from my brain. She emptied our business account the moment my eyes closed on the operating table. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Michael, 45 years old, successful restaurant owner in Portland. I'd been diagnosed with a meningioma 3 months before when the headaches became unbearable. The doctors assured me it was benign but needed to be removed. The recovery would be challenging, 6 weeks minimum before I could return to work, maybe longer. Throughout the diagnosis and planning, Emma seemed supportive, concerned even. She arranged the appointments, organized our schedule around my recovery, contacted the insurance companies. Looking back, I should have seen it for what it was. Not support, but preparation. The morning of the surgery, Emma kissed me before they wheeled me into the operating room. "Everything's going to be fine," she whispered. I believed her. I thought she meant the surgery. I didn't realize she was talking about her exit strategy. I woke up groggy, disoriented. The surgery had gone well, the nurse told me. The doctor would be in shortly to discuss the results. My sister Diane was sitting beside the bed instead of Emma. I tried to ask where my wife was, but my tongue felt thick, uncooperative. "Don't try to talk yet," Diane said, squeezing my hand. "Just rest." I drifted in and out of consciousness for hours before finally emerging from the anesthesia fog. That's when Diane handed me her tablet. "There's something you need to see, but it can wait if you're not ready." Even with my mind clouded by painkillers, I knew something in her tone, in the careful way she watched my face. I nodded for her to show me. It was an email from Emma, copied to Diane. "Michael, I've filed for divorce. The paperwork should be delivered to the hospital today. I've accepted that we want different things in life, and I can't keep pretending. I've withdrawn my portion of our shared assets, including the business account. My lawyer will be in touch about dividing the rest. I truly wish you a speedy recovery." Emma, 3 paragraphs. Clinical, detached, as if she were cancelling a dinner reservation, not ending. A marriage while I was unconscious on an operating table with my skull cut open. "The papers came while you were still in surgery," Diane said quietly. "A courier delivered them, and Michael, there's more." My head was pounding, the incision site throbbing with each heartbeat, but I gestured for her to continue. "She took almost everything from the business account, $347,000, left exactly $8,542. 16. I closed my eyes. Our restaurant, Ember and Vine, had been profitable for 7 years. We'd been saving to open a second location, years of 60-hour weeks, of sacrificed vacations and delayed gratification. Gone while surgeons were removing unwanted growth from my brain. "Check. Personal accounts," I managed to say, my voice a rasp. Diane looked down. "She took half from your joint checking and emptied the savings completely. $68,000. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. Maybe it was the medication dulling my emotions, or maybe it was because some part of me had seen this coming. The signs had been there for months, maybe years. Emma's increasing detachment, her sudden interest in our finances after years of leaving the books to me, the hushed phone conversations that stopped when I entered the room, the overnight industry, conferences that seemed to multiply. "Call Vincent," I told Diane. Vincent Castillo had been my friend since college and was now one of the top divorce attorneys in Oregon. "Already did," Diane said. "He's coming tomorrow. For now, you need to rest." But rest wouldn't come. Despite the painkillers, despite the exhaustion, my mind kept spinning. 12 years of marriage, the restaurant we'd built from nothing, the house we'd renovated room by room, the future we'd planned together. All of it, a lie, a waiting game. Until she could make her move. I must have drifted off eventually, because when I opened my eyes again, it was morning. Dr. Whitman was checking my vitals, explaining the surgery's success, outlining recovery protocols. I nodded at appropriate intervals, but my mind was elsewhere. After he left, a hospital social worker came by. Empathetic eyes, folder of resources. "Your sister mentioned you received some difficult news post-surgery," she said gently. "I wanted to make sure you have support in place." "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Mr. Collins, receiving major life changes while recovering from brain surgery is extraordinarily stressful. There's no shame in needing help." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I looked at her then, really looked. What I need is to get out of this bed, get back to my business, and figure out how my wife emptied accounts she shouldn't have been able to access alone. She nodded slowly. "I understand, but your recovery has to come first. Brain surgery requires—" "I know what it requires," I said, softening my tone, "and I appreciate your concern, but right now I need to focus on practical matters." After she left, Diane returned with coffee and a bag from the bakery near my house. The smell of cinnamon rolls, my favorite, filled the room, but my stomach turned at the thought of food. "Vincent will be here at 11, she said, checking her watch. "And I've called the bank. They're reviewing the transfers, but since Emma's name was on the business account—" "It shouldn't have been," I said. "Not with withdrawal privileges." "Not for that amount," Diane frowned. "What do you mean?" "When we set up the business account, we established dual authorization for any withdrawal over $10,000. She shouldn't have been able to take that much without my electronic signature." For the first time, a spark of hope. Small, but present. Vincent arrived precisely at 11, immaculate in a charcoal suit, despite it being Sunday. He'd brought an associate, a sharp-eyed woman named Melissa, who took notes on a sleek tablet. "First, how are you feeling?" Vincent asked, his usual intensity tempered with genuine concern. "Like someone drilled a hole in my head and my wife. Robbed me blind while I was out," I replied. "So not great." Vincent nodded once. "I've reviewed what Diane sent over. The timing is problematic for Emma, to put it mildly. Judges tend to frown upon parties who make financial moves while their spouse is literally on an operating table." "The business account required dual authorization for large withdrawals," I explained, wincing as I shifted position. "She shouldn't have been able to take that much." Vincent's eyebrows rose. "Do you have documentation of that arrangement?" "In my office at home. Filing cabinet left side, blue folder labeled Business Formation, and there should be digital copies in my password manager." Vincent turned to Melissa, who nodded and made a note. "We'll need to move quickly," he said. "I'll file emergency. Motions tomorrow to freeze any remaining assets and demand accounting for the withdrawn funds." The fact that she potentially circumvented established withdrawal protocols works in our favor. As they left, Vincent paused at the door. "Michael, I need to ask, is there any chance she left because of the diagnosis? Some people can't handle serious illness in a spouse." The question stung, but I'd asked myself the same thing. The diagnosis was 3 months ago. If she wanted out because of that, why wait until surgery day? Why not leave when we found out? "Because the timing maximized her financial advantage," Diane interjected bitterly. "You were literally unconscious and couldn't stop the transfers." Vincent nodded. "That's how it looks, and that's how we'll present it." After they left, exhaustion crashed over me. The morning's activities had drained what little energy I had. A nurse came in to check my vitals, frowning at my elevated blood pressure. "You need to rest," she admonished. "Whatever's going on can wait." But it couldn't wait. Emma had a 3-day head start already. Who knew what else she was liquidating, hiding, transferring, while I lay here with my head wrapped in bandages? Despite the doctor's objections, I insisted on being discharged the next day. Diane agreed to let me recuperate at her house. A compromise that satisfied Dr. Whitman's concerns about my living alone after brain surgery. Before leaving the hospital, I had Diane bring my laptop. My hands trembled slightly as I logged into our bank accounts. The damage was as reported. Business account nearly empty, personal savings gone, checking reduced by half. But something didn't add up. Even combined, those amounts didn't account for all our assets. Where was the money from the investment account we'd opened 3 years ago? The one with the inheritance from my father. I switched to that institution's website, heart pounding. To my relief, that account appeared untouched, $223,000 still safely invested. Emma must have forgotten about it, or perhaps she didn't have the login information. My father had never quite warmed to Emma, sensing something in her that I'd been blind to. He'd set up the inheritance in my name only, insisting it was just simpler that way. I'd always thought it slightly unfair to Emma. Now, I silently thanked him for his foresight. As Diane drove me to her home in the West Hills, I gazed out at Portland through the passenger window. Early spring rain tapped against the glass, the city shrouded in mist. We passed neighborhoods Emma and I had explored together, restaurants where we'd celebrated anniversaries, parks where we'd lazed away summer Sundays. 12 years of memories, now tainted. She called the restaurant staff yesterday, Diane said, breaking the silence. Told them you'd had complications from surgery and the restaurant would be closed indefinitely. My head snapped up, sending a bolt of pain through my skull. She what? Carlos called me, concerned. He didn't believe her story, said it didn't. Sound right. Carlos was my head chef and had been with us since opening day. He knew something was wrong. I need to call him, I said, reaching for my phone. Already handled it, Diane assured me. I explained that you're recovering well, but that there are some business issues being sorted out. The staff has agreed to hold tight for a week, but Michael, you need to figure out how to make payroll with what's left in the account. The reality of my situation crystallized in that moment. It wasn't just my marriage that was in jeopardy. It was everything I'd built. 35 people depended on Ember and Vine for their livelihoods. Without access to our full funds, how would I pay them? How would I pay our suppliers, our rent, our utilities? For the first time since reading Emma's email, I felt a hot surge of anger break through the shock. This wasn't just about her leaving me. This was about her willingness to destroy what we'd built together, to hurt innocent people who relied on us. She's not going to win, I said, my voice low and steady. Not like this. Diane glanced over, concern etched on her face. Your blood pressure is fine, I finished. This isn't about revenge, Diane. It's about responsibility. Those people count on me. At Diane's house, she showed me to her guest room, already prepared with fresh sheets and extra pillows to help me position my head comfortably. On the nightstand were my prescribed medications, arranged and labeled with dosage times. My sister had always been organized, a trait that had made her an excellent pediatric nurse before she'd switched to hospital administration. Vincent called while you were being discharged, she said, helping me settle into bed. He's filing those emergency motions this afternoon. And Michael. He found something interesting. Emma changed her mailing address 3 weeks ago to an apartment in the Pearl District. She's been planning this for a while. The revelation shouldn't have hurt, not after everything else, but it did. 3 weeks ago, we'd had dinner at our favorite sushi place. She'd held my hand across the table, asked detailed questions about the upcoming surgery, insisted on ordering my favorite sake despite the cost, all while knowing she was leaving, all while planning to empty our accounts. There's more, Diane hesitated. Vincent had his investigator run a preliminary check. She's been seeing someone, a restaurant developer named Adam Reeves. They've been photographed together at industry events going back at least 6 months. 6 months. Around the time she'd started taking a sudden interest in our business finances, insisting she should understand the books better in case something happened to me. I'd been touched by her concern then, grateful for her increasing engagement in the business side of Ember and Vine after years of focusing solely on the front of house operations. I closed my eyes, the pieces falling into place, the late-night inventory sessions, the weekend restaurant research trips, the new clothes, new haircut, new perfume, classic signs that I'd ignored because I trusted her, because I loved her. "I need my phone," I said, suddenly remembering something. Diane handed it to me, watching as I pulled up the banking app and navigated to the settings. There it was, a notification I'd dismissed 3 weeks ago while in a meeting with our produce supplier. Secondary authorization method changed. I'd assumed it was routine bank security update, hadn't given it a second thought amid surgery preparations and restaurant operations. "She changed the dual authorization requirements," I said, showing Diane. "Probably claimed she needed full access while I was recovering." Diane's expression hardened. "That's fraud, Michael." "It is," I agreed, "and now we can prove it." I forwarded the notification to Vincent, along with a message explaining its significance. His response came quickly. "This changes things. We'll update the emergency filing immediately." That night, sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by pain, by thoughts of Emma and Adam planning together, by anxiety over the restaurant staff. When morning arrived, I felt no more rested than when I'd laid down. Diane brought breakfast and more news. Vincent called. The emergency hearing is set for tomorrow morning. The judge was concerned about the circumstances. "I need to be there," I said, struggling to sit up. "Michael, you had brain surgery 3 days ago, and I need to be in that courtroom. The judge needs to see what she did, who she did." "It too?" Diane pressed her lips together, then nodded once. "I'll help you, but you'll wear a suit to cover up how thin you've gotten, and I'm doing something about those dark circles under your eyes." The next morning, Vincent met us at the courthouse, eyebrows rising slightly at my appearance. Despite Diane's best efforts with concealer, I looked like what I was. A man 3 days post-brain surgery. The incision was hidden beneath a stylish cap Diane had purchased, but nothing could disguise the paleness, the slight tremor in my hands, the careful way I moved. "This might actually work in our favor," Vincent murmured as we waited in the hallway. "Emma's attorney tried to get this, pushed back a week, claiming she needed time to prepare. Judge Harmon declined rather forcefully." "Is she here?" I asked, scanning the hallway. "Not yet, but she'll be here." Judge Harmon made it clear that absence would not be looked upon kindly. 20 minutes later, Emma arrived with a man I assumed was her attorney, silver-haired, expensive suit, air of practiced concern. Emma herself was immaculately dressed in a conservative navy dress, hair pulled back in a simple knot. She faltered slightly when she saw me, eyes widening at my appearance, before quickly composing herself. Our eyes met across the hallway. 12 years of history hung in the space between us. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of remorse cross her face. Then her attorney leaned down to whisper something, and her expression hardened into cool determination. Vincent touched my arm. "They're calling us in." As we entered the courtroom, I couldn't help wondering how we'd gotten here. From the hopeful couple who'd signed a lease on a dilapidated restaurant space with more dreams than capital, to adversaries in a courtroom, unable even to acknowledge each other with a simple nod. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Harmon entered, a formidable woman in her 60s, with shrewd eyes and an air of no-nonsense efficiency. As she took her seat and surveyed the parties before her, I straightened my posture despite the pain that radiated from my incision site. Whatever happened next, I was ready to fight, not just for what was mine, but for everyone who depended on me. Emma may have thought she'd timed her exit perfectly, striking when I was at my most vulnerable, but she'd underestimated me. Brain. Tumor or not, betrayal or not, I wasn't going down without a battle. The judge glanced at me, then at Emma, her expression unreadable. "Well," she said, shuffling the papers before her, "this is certainly an unusual situation. Let's begin." The courtroom fell silent as Vincent presented our emergency motion. He was methodical, his voice calm but resonant as he outlined the facts. My brain surgery, Emma's calculated timing, the mysteriously changed authorization requirements, the devastating withdrawals that threatened not just my livelihood, but the jobs of 35 employees. "Your Honor," Vincent said, "we have evidence that Mrs. Collins deliberately altered the dual authorization requirements on their business account 3 weeks before Mr. Collins' surgery, without his knowledge or consent. This wasn't a spouse making a difficult decision to leave. This was a premeditated financial assault executed at the precise moment when Mr. Collins was physically incapable of protecting himself or his business." Judge Harmon's gaze shifted to Emma, who sat rigid beside her attorney. "These are serious allegations, counsel. What does your client have to say?" Emma's attorney, Mr. Pearson, rose smoothly. "Your Honor, this characterization is both inflammatory and inaccurate. Mrs. Collins has been an equal partner in Ember and Vine since its inception. The funds she withdrew represent her rightful share of the business she helped build. As for the timing, my client has been planning to leave this marriage for some time, but waited until Mr. Collins had family support in place for his medical procedure." Dadu. A wave of dizziness washed over me. The audacity of that statement, painting her actions as considerate rather than calculating, made my surgical sight throb with renewed intensity. Diane must have noticed my pallor, because she slipped a small bottle of water into my hand under the table. Judge Harmon leaned forward. "Mr. Pearson, are you seriously arguing that serving divorce papers to a man in post-operative recovery and simultaneously draining business accounts was an act of consideration?" Pearson didn't flinch. "My client made a difficult decision at a difficult time, but nothing she did was illegal. The accounts bore her name. The business lists her as co-owner." Vincent stood again. "Your Honor, if I may, the operating agreement for Ember and Vine specifically requires dual authorization for withdrawals over $10,000, a protection Mr. Collins prudently put in place when establishing the business. We have evidence that Mrs. Collins surreptitiously changed these authorization requirements 3 weeks before Mr. Collins's surgery." He presented the banking notification I'd found, along with the original business operating agreement. "This constitutes fraud, Your Honor, and it speaks to the calculated nature of Mrs. Collins's actions." Judge Harmon studied the documents, her expression growing increasingly severe. "Mrs. Collins," she said finally, looking directly at Emma, "did you change the authorization requirements for the business account without your husband's knowledge?" For the first time, Emma appeared uncertain. She whispered something to Pearson, who nodded. "Your Honor," Pearson interjected, "my client had authorization as a business partner to make administrative changes to the account." "That wasn't my question," Judge Harmon said sharply. "Mrs. Collins, I'm speaking directly to you now. Did you change these requirements without informing your husband?" The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Emma straightened her shoulders. "I did what was necessary to protect my interests. Michael was about to be incapacitated. I needed access to the funds that were rightfully mine." "And did you inform Mr. Collins of these changes?" A pause. "No, Your Honor." Judge Harmon's pen tapped against her desk. Once, twice. "Mr. Pearson, does your client understand that Changing financial controls without the knowledge of her business partner potentially constitutes fraud, regardless of their marital status. Pearson shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, there were extenuating circumstances. Yes or no, counsel? My client believed she was acting within her rights as co-owner. Judge Harmon's eyes narrowed. I'm granting the emergency motion. All remaining funds are frozen, and Mrs. Collins is hereby ordered to provide a full accounting of every dollar withdrawn within 48 hours. She turned to Emma. Mrs. Collins, you will return $175,000 to the business account by close of business. Tomorrow, half of what you took, which will allow the business to continue operations while we sort out the rest in proper proceedings. Emma's face flushed. Your Honor, I don't have— That's your problem to solve, Mrs. Collins, Judge Harmon interrupted. Perhaps you should consult the person who's been photographed with you at various restaurant industry events for the past 6 months. I believe his name is on these credit card receipts submitted as evidence. She held up a page from Vincent's filing, evidence his investigator had gathered showing Emma and Adam Reeves dining together at upscale restaurants across Portland, dating back months before my diagnosis. Emma paled, and I felt a strange hollowness open up inside me. It was one thing to suspect an affair, another to have it confirmed so publicly, so starkly. Judge Harmon continued, her voice steely. This court takes a very dim view of parties who attempt to exploit medical emergencies for financial gain, Mrs. Collins. Very dim indeed. We will reconvene in 1 week for a follow-up hearing on this matter. If the funds are not returned as ordered, we will be discussing contempt proceedings. She gavelled the hearing closed. As we stood, I swayed slightly, my head spinning. The effort of sitting upright for so long, the stress of seeing Emma, the intensity of the proceedings, it was all catching up to me. Diane gripped my elbow, stabilizing me. Easy, she murmured. We're done here. Let's get you home. Vincent gathered his papers, looking pleased. That went better than expected. Judge Harmon is known for being fair but tough. The fact that she ordered an immediate return of funds speaks volumes about how she views Emma's actions. As we turned to leave, I caught Emma staring at me, her expression unreadable. For 12 years, I thought I knew every subtle shift of those features, every meaning behind those eyes. Now, she was a stranger. Michael, she said, taking a step toward me. Her voice was different, softer, less certain than in court. I never meant for— Save it for the next hearing, Vincent interrupted smoothly, stepping between us. Any communication should go through counsel. Outside the courthouse, the spring rain had given way to weak sunshine. As Diane guided me to her car, I realized I'd been holding my breath, my muscles tensed, as if bracing for a blow. Now, with the hearing over and a small victory secured, exhaustion crashed over me. You did well in there, Diane said as she drove us back to her house. Most people wouldn't have even been able to sit upright 3 days after brain surgery, let alone face down their cheating, thieving spouse in court. I leaned my head against the cool window glass. It doesn't feel like a victory. It's not a victory, she agreed. It's a first step. Emma isn't going to just roll over and give back everything. You know that, right? I did know. Despite Judge Harmon's order, I doubted Emma would return the full $175,000 by tomorrow. She'd come up with excuses, delays, complicated explanations about where the money had gone. Back at Diane's house, I collapsed onto the guest bed, the cap still on my head. Too tired even to kick off my shoes. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Carlos, my head chef. Heard about court, the team is with you, boss. We'll make it work, whatever happens. A lump formed in my throat. These people, my restaurant family, had nothing to do with my failed marriage, yet their livelihoods hung in the balance because of Emma's betrayal. I texted back, "We're not closing. Not now, not ever. I'll see you tomorrow. Diane appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Tell me you're not planning what I think you're planning. I need to see the restaurant. Talk to the staff in person. Michael, you had brain surgery 4 days ago. You can barely stand for 20 minutes. Then I'll sit, I replied. But I'm going. These people deserve to hear from me, not through the rumor mill. Diane looked like she wanted to argue, but instead sighed deeply. Fine, but I'm driving, and you're staying for no more than an hour. That night, despite the pain and exhaustion, I forced myself to focus. Using Diane's tablet, I went through our restaurant's financial records, all of which thankfully were cloud-based and accessible. The picture was grim, but not hopeless. If, and it was a big if, Emma returned half the money as ordered, we could make payroll, pay our essential vendors, and keep the doors open while sorting out the rest. But there was something else nagging at me, something about the timing of it all. Emma had started her affair with Adam Reeves at least 6 months ago, according to Vincent's investigator. My tumor diagnosis came 3 months ago. She'd changed. The account authorizations 3 weeks ago, just after my surgery was scheduled. Why wait? If she'd wanted out, why not leave before my diagnosis? Or immediately after? Why the elaborate charade of supportive spouse throughout my medical crisis? Only to strike on surgery day. The answer came to me as I scrolled through our business calendar. The restaurant's insurance policy. 6 months ago, we'd upgraded our insurance coverage, including a substantial key person policy on both of us. If anything happened to either partner, death, or permanent disability, the business would receive a payout intended to weather the transition. My hands trembled as I pulled up the policy details. There it was, a $500,000 payout if either Emma or I died or became permanently disabled, with double indemnity for certain medical conditions. Brain conditions were specifically listed. Cold realization washed over me. Emma hadn't just been waiting for an opportune moment to leave. She'd been waiting to see if my condition would worsen, if the tumor would prove malignant rather than benign, if there would be complications from surgery that might trigger the policy. When the pathology had confirmed the tumor was benign and the surgery straightforward, she'd switched to Plan B, take what she could and run. I called Vincent immediately, not caring that it was nearly midnight. "The insurance policy," I said when he answered, skipping any greeting. She was waiting to see if my condition would trigger the key person policy. A beat of silence then. "Send me the details now." The next morning, despite Diane's protests, I insisted on going to Ember and Vine. The restaurant was closed for lunch service, a financial hit but necessary given the circumstances. Carlos had arranged for all staff to be present for an 11 a.m. meeting. Walking through those doors was harder than I'd anticipated. Emma and I had designed every inch of this space together, from the reclaimed wood tables to the custom copper, light fixtures to the massive stone hearth that gave the restaurant its name. Her touch was everywhere, making the betrayal feel even more complete. The staff rose as I entered, their faces a mixture of concern, curiosity, and relief. Carlos stepped forward first, embracing me carefully, mindful of my condition. "Good to see you vertical, boss," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. I surveyed the room. Servers, line cooks, bartenders, hosts, dishwashers, all watching, waiting. These people depended on me, on the business Emma had tried to destroy. "I imagine you've all heard various versions of what's happening," I began, lowering myself into a chair. "I want to give you the facts directly. 3 days ago, while I was in surgery, my wife filed for divorce and withdrew nearly all the funds from our business accounts. Yesterday, a judge ordered her to return half of what she took, which should allow us to make payroll and keep operating." Murmurs rippled through the staff. Maria, our head server, raised her hand. "Is it true she told suppliers we're closing permanently?" Pablo from the produce company called me, worried about his invoices. I hadn't known this. Another piece of Emma's plan, isolating the restaurant from its suppliers. "We are not closing," I said firmly. "Not temporarily, not permanently. We may need to adjust in the short term, limited menu, reduced hours, but Ember and Vine will continue." The relief in the room was palpable. These weren't just employees. They were people with rent to pay, families to support. "I won't lie to you," I continued. "The next few weeks will be challenging. If anyone needs to look for more stable work, I understand completely. No hard feelings." Not a single person moved. Carlos stepped forward again. "We've been talking. Boss, we want to help. Several of us are willing to defer part of our pay until this is sorted out. Maria's cousin is an accountant. She's offered to review the books pro bono." I looked around the room at these faces I knew so well. People who had no obligation to stand by me or the restaurant in this crisis, yet here they were, offering what they could. "I don't know what to say," I managed, my voice rough with emotion. "You don't need to say anything," Carlos replied. "You've had our backs for years. Now we have yours." As the meeting concluded and staff dispersed to prepare for a limited dinner service, my phone rang. "Vincent. Emma's attorney just called. She's only returning $60,000, claiming the rest is already spent or transferred to accounts she can't access immediately." My jaw tightened. Judge Harmon ordered $175,000. "I know. I've already filed a contempt motion. But there's something else." I reviewed that insurance policy. "Michael, the language is specific about permanent disability resulting from the medical condition. A benign tumor successfully removed doesn't qualify." "So she was waiting to see if I'd be permanently disabled," I said, the words ashen in my mouth, "and when that didn't happen." "She moved to Plan B," Vincent finished. "We can use this, Michael. It shows premeditation, potentially even intent to delay medical intervention." He paused. "Did she ever suggest postponing your surgery?" Memory flashed. Emma suggesting we get a fourth opinion, mentioning an experimental treatment in Switzerland, wondering aloud if surgery was really necessary right away. At the time, I'd attributed it to concern. Now, "Yes," I said quietly, "several times. We need to document that. And Michael, Judge Harmon needs to hear about this insurance angle. It changes the entire complexion of the case." After hanging up, I sat in my office, the space Emma and I had shared for 7 years, and tried to process this new revelation. The woman I'd built a life with, a business with, hadn't just betrayed me. She'd potentially been hoping my medical condition would worsen to trigger an insurance payout. Carlos knocked on the doorframe, interrupting my dark thoughts. "We need to talk about the menu for tonight, with limited staff and supplies." I gratefully turned my attention to the immediate problem, keeping Ember and Vine running. We decided on a streamlined menu featuring our most popular dishes, focusing on ingredients we had on hand or could source quickly. "One more thing," Carlos said as he turned to leave. "Adam Reeves came by yesterday while you were in court, said he was interested in buying the restaurant, offered to take it off your hands given your unfortunate situation." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about Emma leaving me. This was about her and Adam acquiring Ember and Vine, the restaurant I'd conceptualized, built from nothing, poured my soul into at a fire sale price after financially crippling me. "What did you tell him?" I asked Carlos. A slow smile spread across his face. "I told him the owner was in court that day, forcing his girlfriend to return the money she stole, and that Ember and Vine wasn't for sale at any price." For the first time in days, I laughed, a short, painful sound, but genuine. I wish I could have seen his face. "It was worth seeing," Carlos assured me. Man looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. That evening, I insisted on being present for dinner service, despite Diane's concerns. I couldn't cook or serve in my condition, but I could greet guests, explain the limited menu, be the face of resilience. Many were regulars who'd heard rumors. Seeing me there, bandaged but unbowed, seemed to reassure them. By closing time, I was utterly spent, pain radiating from my surgical site, but also filled with a fierce determination. Emma and Adam might have thought they could break me, break Ember and Vine, but they had underestimated both. The next morning brought the contempt hearing for Emma's failure to return the full amount ordered. Judge Harmon was not pleased. "Mrs. Collins," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger, "you were ordered to return $175,000 by close of business yesterday. You returned approximately one-third of that amount. Explain yourself." Emma, dressed impeccably again, but noticeably tenser than before, addressed the court. "Your Honor, I simply don't have access to the full amount immediately. Some funds were used for necessary expenses." "Such as?" Judge Harmon interrupted. Emma faltered. "Legal fees, securing new housing, personal necessities." "Receipts," Judge Harmon demanded. "I want receipts for every dollar not returned. On my desk by 5 p.m. today." She turned to Vincent. "Counsel, I believe you have additional information for the court." Vincent stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We've discovered evidence suggesting Mrs. Collins' actions may have been even more calculated than previously thought." He presented the key person insurance policy, highlighting the specific language about permanent disability and the double indemnity for brain conditions. He detailed Emma's multiple attempts to delay my surgery, supported by text messages I'd provided showing her suggesting postponements. "Your Honor," Vincent continued, "we believe Mrs. Collins was waiting to see if Mr. Collins's medical condition would trigger this substantial insurance payout. When it became clear his surgery was successful and no permanent disability would result, she executed Plan B, draining the accounts while he was physically incapable of stopping her." The courtroom fell silent. I watched Emma's face, searching for any sign of the woman I thought I'd known. Her expression remained carefully blank, but her fingers gripped the table edge until her knuckles whitened. Judge Harmon reviewed the documents, her expression growing darker by the minute. When she looked up, her eyes were flinty. "Mrs. Collins, these allegations, if proven, constitute not just financial misconduct, but potentially criminal behavior." She turned to Pearson. "Counsel, I strongly suggest you confer with your client about her position in this matter." Emma whispered urgently to Pearson, who appeared increasingly uncomfortable. "Your Honor," Pearson said finally, "my client maintains that her actions, while perhaps ill-timed, were legal withdrawals of her share of marital assets." "And the insurance policy? The delayed surgery suggestions? The conveniently timed changes to account authorizations?" Judge Harmon asked. "Coincidental timing, Your Honor." Judge Harmon removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Mr. Pearson, in my 22 years on the bench, I have developed a finely tuned sense for when I'm being fed horseshit. Today, the stench is overwhelming." A ripple of murmurs ran through the courtroom. Emma's composed facade cracked slightly. "Here's what's going to happen," Judge Harmon continued. "Mrs. Collins will return the full $175,000 by 5 p.m. today, or she will spend the night as a guest of the county. Additionally, I am ordering a complete forensic accounting of all business and personal accounts associated with the Collins marriage, to be conducted by a court-appointed professional at Mrs. Collins' expense." She turned to me. "Mr. Collins, how is your health progressing?" Surprised by the direct question, I stood carefully. "Improving daily, Your Honor. The surgery was successful, and my doctors expect a full recovery." She nodded. "I'm glad to hear it. And your business?" "Operating on a limited basis for now, but we're determined to weather this storm." "Very good." She turned back to Emma. "Mrs. Collins, This court will not allow you to destroy a viable business and the livelihoods it supports as a parting gift in your marriage, nor will it countenance what appears to be a deliberate attempt to exploit your husband's medical condition for financial gain. With a final rap of her gavel, Judge Harmon closed the hearing. As we gathered our things to leave, I caught sight of Adam Reeves slipping out from the back row of the courtroom. He'd been watching the whole time, no doubt hoping to see Ember and Vine pushed closer to insolvency, ripe for his taking. Outside, Vincent was jubilant. I've rarely seen Judge Harmon that incensed. She's normally the picture of judicial restraint. "Will Emma really return the money?" I asked, unconvinced. "She'd better," Vincent replied. "Judge Harmon doesn't make idle threats about county accommodations." As we walked toward the courthouse exit, my phone rang, an unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something prompted me to answer. "Is this Michael Collins?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Tanya Reeves. I believe you know my husband, Adam." I stopped walking, signaling to Vincent and Diane to wait. "Yes, I know of him." "We need to talk," she said, her voice tense, "about your wife, my husband, and 3 other restaurants they've targeted over the past 2 years. I met Tanya Reeves at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of Portland, far from downtown where someone might recognize us. Vincent insisted on coming with me, concerned about both my medical condition and the legal implications of the meeting. Diane drove us, but remained in the car, giving us privacy while staying close enough to intervene if needed. Tanya was nothing like I'd imagined Adam Reeves's wife would be. In my mind, I'd pictured someone like Emma, polished, carefully composed, calculated. Instead, Tanya was unvarnished, with tired eyes and hands that constantly twisted a paper napkin as she spoke. She looked like someone who'd been through war. "I'm sorry about approaching you like this," she began after we'd settled into a corner booth. "But when I saw the court filing, I knew I had to do something." "How did you see the filing?" "Vincent," asked Eva the attorney. "I have alerts set up for Adam's name in legal databases," she explained. "I've been tracking his activities for over a year, building my own case." She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were photographs, bank statements, emails, and what looked like journal entries, all meticulously organized and annotated. "Adam and I have been separated for 18 months, she continued. "Not legally. He refuses to file for divorce because of the financial implications. We have a prenup that becomes less favorable to him the longer we're married." I flipped through the documents, my stomach sinking as patterns emerged. Photos showed Adam with different women at industry events, Emma being only the most recent. Bank statements highlighted suspicious transfers. Emails detailed what could only be described as a playbook. "He targets restaurant owners," Tanya explained, her voice flat, "preferably ones in vulnerable positions, health issues, marital problems, financial struggles. He seduces their wives or husbands, convinces them their spouse is hiding assets or planning to leave them with nothing, then helps them execute what he calls an extraction." "Extraction," I repeated, the clinical term making me nauseous. She nodded. "Once the business is destabilized, he swoops in with a lowball offer to help. The spouse gets a cut, Adam gets a profitable restaurant at a fraction of its value, and the original owner is left with nothing." Vincent was taking notes, his expression grave. "And you have evidence this has happened before? 3 times that I can document conclusively." She pointed to different sections of her folder. The Copper Pot in Seattle, Bayview Bistro in San Francisco, and Trattoria Luca here in Portland. All followed the same pattern: affair with the spouse, sudden financial emergency, Adam to the rescue with cash offers well below market value. My mind raced back to Carlos's report of Adam stopping by Ember and Vine, with his offer to take it off my hands. The same script being executed again. What happened to the original owners? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Tanya's eyes met mine, filled with grim determination. One committed suicide 6 months later, one moved out of state, completely broke. The third is still fighting in court, but Adam's dragging it out until legal fees break them. I pushed the folder back toward her, unable to stomach any more details. Why are you showing me this? Why now? Because you're still fighting, she said simply, and because your case has something the others didn't, a judge who seems to see through the scheme. Vincent tapped his pen against his notepad. Mrs. Reeves, would you be willing to provide official testimony about this pattern of behavior? She hesitated, fear flickering across her face. Adam is vindictive and connected. Previous attempts to alert authorities haven't gone well for me. What happened? I asked. Suddenly my tax returns were being audited. My brother's business license had paperwork issues, and my parents' mortgage application was mysteriously rejected. She gave a bitter smile. Adam has friends in various institutions. I understood her fear. Taking on someone with connections meant fighting not just the person, but their entire network. What if you weren't alone this time, as I suggested? What if we combined forces, your documentation, my case, Judge Harmon's interest? Tanya studied me carefully. You still look like hell, you know. 3 weeks post-brain surgery, and you're sitting here plotting a counterattack instead of recovering. Why not just cut your losses? Start over somewhere else? The question struck me as oddly personal coming from a stranger, but also genuine. She'd seen others crushed by Adam and Emma's scheme, understood the toll it took. 35 people depend on Ember and Vine for their livelihoods, I said after a moment. I built that restaurant from nothing, 80-hour weeks, maxed out credit cards, sleeping on a cot in the office during the first year. It's not just a business to me. I paused, realizing there was more to it. And, honestly, I'm tired of people like Adam and Emma thinking they can just take what others have built, that there are no consequences for the destruction they cause. Vincent cleared his throat. If you're willing to testify, Mrs. Reeves, we can request protective measures. Judge Harmon has already demonstrated she takes a dim view of financial predators. Tanya folded her hands on the table, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. If, and it's a big if, I testify, I want immunity from any potential charges. I didn't know about Adam's schemes initially, but I've been gathering evidence rather than reporting, which could be construed as complicity. I'll speak with the district attorney, Vincent promised. Given what you've shown us, I believe they'll be amenable. As we wrapped up the meeting, arranging secure methods of communication, Tanya stopped me with a gentle touch on my arm. Mr. Collins, Michael, there's something else you should know. Her eyes held a mixture of compassion and hesitation. Emma wasn't Adam's first choice at Ember and Vine. He originally approached your bar manager, Layla. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Layla had been with us almost since opening, had become Emma's close friend over the years. Layla turned him down, Tanya continued. Told him she wasn't interested in betraying her employers. That's when he switched tactics and targeted Emma. I nodded slowly, absorbing this new information. Thank you for telling me. Later that evening, back at Diane's house, I sat with an ice pack against my throbbing incision site. The day's events had taken a toll physically, but mentally I felt more focused than I had since receiving those divorce papers. You need to rest, Diane insisted, setting a plate of food beside me that I had no appetite for. This revenge quest is going to set back your recovery. It's not about revenge, I corrected. It's about justice, not just for me, but for everyone. They've hurt. My phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Emma transferred the full $175K at 4:58 p.m., 2 minutes before deadline. Cutting it close, At least Ember and Vine could continue operating while we fought the larger battle. I sent a quick update to Carlos, who responded with a thumbs-up emoji, and staff voted. We're doing a limited reopening tomorrow. Doctor's orders. You, stay home. Despite my exhaustion, I couldn't help but smile. My team was stepping up, taking charge, determined to keep the restaurant alive, even as I focused on recovery and legal battles. The next morning brought unexpected news. Judge Harmon had assigned our case to an accelerated track, citing concerns about ongoing business viability and unusual circumstances. Our next court date was set for just 5 days away, lightning speed in the normally glacial pace of legal proceedings. She's really invested in this case, Vincent remarked during our morning call. I've never seen her move this quickly on a divorce matter. Is that good for us? I asked, wincing as I adjusted my position on Diane's couch. Very. It means Emma and Adam have less time to hide assets or cover tracks, and I've got more news. I spoke with the district attorney this morning. They're interested in Tanya's evidence, especially in light of potential wire fraud across state lines. Wire fraud, I echoed. The transfers between accounts in different states, communication across state lines to plan the schemes. It potentially elevates this from a civil matter to a federal crime. For the first time since reading that divorce email, I felt something close to hope. Not just that I might save my restaurant, but that the people who'd done this might actually face consequences. That afternoon, I insisted on visiting Ember and Vine, despite Diane's protests. I needed to see the reopening for myself, needed to feel the heartbeat of the place I'd built. The restaurant was operating at reduced capacity, only 20 tables, instead of our usual 40, with a streamlined menu focused on our signature dishes. But the energy was unmistakable. Servers moved with purpose, the kitchen hummed with familiar rhythm, and every table was filled with diners who'd made a point of coming to support us. Carlos spotted me from the kitchen pass and hurried over, wiping his hands on his apron. "You shouldn't be here," he scolded, though I could see he was pleased. "Needed to see it for myself," I replied, carefully lowering myself into a chair near the entrance. "How's it going?" "Better than expected. We're fully booked through Saturday. Word spread about what happened. The community's rallying around us." As if to confirm his words, a middle-aged couple stopped on their way out. "We've been coming here since you opened," the woman said, touching my shoulder gently. "Our anniversary, birthdays, family celebrations, all here. We're not about to let some corporate vulture take that away." Her husband nodded in agreement. "My brother's a contractor, said to tell you any repairs or remodeling you need, consider it handled, at cost." After they left, I sat in stunned silence. Carlos grinned. "Been happening all night. Suppliers offering extended terms, regulars prepaying for future events, other restaurant owners sending staff to help during the crunch. A community I hadn't fully realized existed was forming a human shield around Ember and Vine, protecting what we'd built not just because they liked our food, but because they recognized the value of something authentic in a world increasingly dominated by corporate chains and cynical profiteers. My phone buzzed. Vincent again. "Need to meet tonight. DA wants to move forward based on Tanya's evidence. Plus our case. Potential conspiracy charges for both Emma and Adam." The next 5 days passed in a blur of legal meetings, medical checkups, and careful distance management from the restaurant operations. Despite my desire to be hands-on, I recognized that my team was handling things beautifully, and my recovery needed to take priority. The district attorney's office had moved with surprising speed, compiling Tanya's evidence with our case and identifying additional potential victims of Adam's scheme. The picture emerging was uglier than any of us had initially imagined. a deliberate, systematic pattern of targeting vulnerable restaurant owners using romantic partners as financial Trojan horses. By the time our accelerated court date arrived, I felt stronger both physically and mentally. The constant headaches had subsided, the incision was healing well, and most importantly, I'd found clarity about what I wanted from these proceedings. Judge Harmon's courtroom was more crowded than before. In addition to our legal teams, representatives from the district attorney's office were present, as well as Tanya Reeves and someone I recognized with surprise, Brian Ellison, the former, owner of Trattoria Luca, one of Adam's previous victims. Emma looked markedly different than at our last appearance. Gone was the immaculate professional appearance, replaced by visible strain. She entered without Adam, accompanied only by a new attorney, Pearson apparently having withdrawn from the case. Judge Harmon surveyed the assembled parties with a piercing gaze. "This case has expanded in scope since our last meeting," she observed. "I've reviewed the additional filings and evidence, including Mrs. Reeves's affidavit and the district attorney's petition to join certain aspects of these proceedings." She turned to Emma's new attorney. "Ms. Winters, your client is now facing potential criminal charges in addition to the divorce proceedings. Has she been advised of her rights?" The attorney straightened. "Yes, Your Honor. And while we maintain Mrs. Collins' innocence of any criminal wrongdoing, we are prepared to discuss a resolution to the divorce matter that may address some of the court's concerns." Judge Harmon nodded. "Before we proceed, where is Mr. Reeves? I expected him to be present given his involvement in these matters." "We're unable to locate him at this time, Your Honor," the district attorney's representative stated. "His apartment was vacated yesterday, and he's not responding to calls or emails." I exchanged glances with Vincent. Adam running wasn't surprising, but it complicated matters. Judge Harmon frowned. "I'm issuing a bench warrant for Mr. Reeves. Now, regarding the matter at hand, Ms. Winters, you mentioned a proposed resolution?" Emma's attorney conferred briefly with her client before addressing the court. "Mrs. Collins is prepared to relinquish all claims to Ember and Vine, return any remaining funds from the disputed withdrawals, and provide a complete accounting of all transfers made." Vincent leaned toward me. "She's cutting Adam loose," he whispered, "trying to save herself." Judge Harmon seemed to have the same thought. "And what about Mrs. Collins' involvement with Mr. Reeves and the alleged pattern of business acquisitions through financial manipulation?" Emma's attorney hesitated. "My client is willing to provide information about Mr. Reeves's business practices in exchange for consideration regarding potential charges. She's offering to flip on Adam," the district attorney's representative murmured, loud enough for our side to hear. For the first time, I looked directly at Emma. Our eyes met across the courtroom. The woman I'd loved, built a life with, shared dreams with, now reduced to bargaining information to save herself. I felt no satisfaction in her desperation, only a profound sadness for what could have been. The proceedings continued with technical legal discussions. Proposals, counter-proposals, clarifications of what Emma knew and when she knew it. It became increasingly clear that while she had willingly participated in emptying our accounts, she might not have fully understood Adam's larger pattern until she was already compromised. During a brief recess, Vincent pulled me aside. "DA's offering her a deal. Full cooperation against Adam in exchange for reduced charges. She'll still face consequences for the account fraud, but nothing like what they're building against Reeves." "What do you think?" I asked. "Strategically, take it. Get her to relinquish all claims to the business, return whatever funds remain, and provide testimony against Adam. That gives you the clean break you need to rebuild without years of legal battles." I nodded slowly, processing. "And the other victims, Brian Ellison and the others?" "The DA's building a separate case for them, civil and criminal. Emma's testimony would strengthen those cases too. When court resumed, Judge Harmon directed the attorneys to formalize the proposed agreement, setting another hearing for the following week. "And, Mrs. Collins," she added, fixing Emma with a stern gaze, "this court expects full and complete disclosure. Any attempt to minimize your role or protect Mr. Reeves will be viewed extremely unfavorably." As the session concluded, I found myself standing near Brian Ellison in the hallway outside. We'd never met, but I'd eaten at his restaurant before. "Adam's scheme destroyed it. You look better than I did 3 weeks after finding out," he said, offering his hand. "Took me months just to get out of bed." "I had good people around me," I replied, shaking his hand. "Made all the difference." He nodded, understanding. I didn't. Tried to handle everything myself, pushed everyone away. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. Restaurant gone, savings gone, even my house gone to cover legal fees. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "What are you doing now?" A small smile touched his lips. "Teaching culinary arts at the community college. Not what I planned, but turns out I enjoy showing others what took me years to learn." "Will the DA's case help you recover anything?" He shrugged. "Maybe eventually, but that's not why I'm here today." He gestured toward the courtroom we just left. "I'm here because someone finally saw through Reeves's scheme before it was completed, because someone fought back and won. That matters, even if I never see a dime." His words stayed with me as Diane drove us back to her house. Someone fought back and won, not just for themselves, but creating a ripple that might eventually bring justice for others. Over the next week, Emma's cooperation proved invaluable to the authorities. She provided access to emails, text messages, and recorded conversations that revealed the extent of Adam's schemes. He'd targeted not just 3 restaurants, as Tanya had documented, but 7 across the Pacific Northwest over the past 5 years, a systematic predator moving from one victim to the next. Federal authorities joined the investigation, following financial trails across state lines. Adam remained missing, but his absence only intensified the search. Assets in his name were frozen, including accounts in the Cayman Islands that held funds from previous extractions. Meanwhile, Ember and Vine continued its recovery. With the $175,000 returned and legal matters proceeding favorably, we resumed full operations. The staff worked with renewed purpose, many putting in extra hours, not because I asked, but because they felt personally invested in our comeback. Layla, my bar manager, the one who turned down Adam's initial advances, approached me one evening as I sat reviewing invoices in my office. "I should have warned you," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "When Adam approached me, I shut him down but didn't think to tell you about it. I didn't realize what he was really doing until it was too late." I set down my pen. "You couldn't have known." "I knew he was sleazy," she insisted. "I knew he was asking questions about the business that a guy just trying to flirt wouldn't ask. I should have seen the pattern." "We all missed it," I assured her. "Even me, and I was married to his co-conspirator." She studied me for a moment. "How are you really doing with all this? And don't give me the brave face you show everyone else." The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the legal battle, the restaurant's recovery, my physical healing, that I'd pushed aside the personal betrayal. "I don't know," I admitted. "Some days I'm angry. Some days I'm just empty. 12 years of marriage and I never really knew her." Layla nodded. "For what it's worth, I don't think Emma started out planning this. Adam's good at what he does. Finds people's vulnerabilities, exploits them, convinces them they're doing the right thing even when they know better. That doesn't excuse her choices." "No," she agreed, "it doesn't. The final resolution of our divorce case came 7 weeks after I'd received those papers while still under anesthesia. By then my incision had healed to a thin red line, partially hidden by regrown hair. I'd moved back into our house, now just my house, and resumed limited duties at Ember and Vine. In Judge Harmon's courtroom for the last time, Emma appeared without any of her former confidence. Her testimony against Adam had exposed her own complicity, but also painted a picture of manipulation and escalating involvement that the court took into consideration. The terms were better than I could have hoped for. I retained full ownership of Ember and Vine. Emma relinquished all claims to the business, our house, and my retirement accounts. In exchange, she kept her car, personal possessions, and avoided the most serious criminal charges. She would still face penalties for the account fraud, 2 years probation, community service, and restitution payments to be determined in a separate hearing. As Judge Harmon made the divorce decree official, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just relief that this chapter was closing. "Mr. Collins," Judge Harmon said before concluding, "I rarely comment personally on cases before me, but I want to acknowledge your dignity throughout these proceedings. Despite extraordinary circumstances and provocation, you've conducted yourself with remarkable restraint and integrity." I nodded my thanks, unable to find appropriate words. Outside the courthouse, Emma approached me, the first time we'd spoken. Directly since before my surgery, Vincent tensed beside me, but I gestured that it was okay. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said quietly. "That probably doesn't mean anything to you now, but it's true." I studied her face, searching for the woman I'd loved. "When did it start? With Adam, I mean." She looked down. "Last summer, the industry conference in Seattle. 9 months ago, before my diagnosis, before any of this had seemed possible. He made me feel special," she continued, "said I was wasting my talent being just the wife in our business, that I deserved more. It was flattering, then exciting, then—" She trailed off. "Then it was too late to back out," I finished for her. She nodded. "After the first few steps, the account changes, the plans for divorce, I was already complicit. And then your diagnosis came, and Adam said it was perfect timing, that we could use my illness to your advantage," I said, my voice flat. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears welling. "I know that means nothing, but I am." I felt Diane step up beside me, her presence supportive, but not intrusive. "You're right," I said finally. "It doesn't change anything, but I hope you find whatever it was you were looking for. I really do." As she walked away, Diane squeezed my arm. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, surprised to find it was true. "Let's go home." Home was different now, quieter, emptier in some ways, but also unburdened by the weight of a failing marriage I hadn't fully acknowledged. I'd redecorated minimally, removing the most painful reminders while preserving the spaces I loved. The restaurant continued to thrive. The publicity from Adam's case had actually increased our business, with people coming from across the region to show support. I'd used some of the recovered funds to give the staff bonuses, acknowledging their loyalty during our darkest hours. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, federal authorities finally located Adam Reeves in Argentina and began extradition proceedings. The case would drag on, but at least he wouldn't be targeting any more restaurant owners, destroying any more lives. Tanya Reeves stopped by Ember and Vine one evening, looking more relaxed than when we'd first met. "I'm moving back to Chicago," she told me over a glass of wine at the bar. "Fresh start?" "Well deserved," I replied, raising my glass to hers. "Your evidence made all the difference." She smiled slightly. "Maybe, but you were the one who refused to be a victim. That made the real difference." After she left, I walked through the restaurant, observing the busy dinner service. Carlos had created new seasonal specials that were drawing rave reviews. Layla had revamped our bar program, earning us a feature in a national magazine. The space hummed with conversation, laughter, the clink of glasses, the rhythm of a restaurant in its prime. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian Ellison. Just got notice of first restitution payment from federal case. Small, but it's something. Thank you. I smiled, pocketing the phone as I continued my walk through the dining room. At a corner table, I spotted Diane with her new boyfriend, an oncologist she'd met during my hospital stays. She waved me over, insisting I join them for dessert. As I sat down, taking in the warmth and life around me, I realized that while Emma and Adam had tried to destroy what I'd built, they'd actually forced me to recognize its true value, not just as a business, but as a community, a purpose, a manifestation of everything I believed in. Some lessons come at an unconscionable price, but that doesn't make them any less valuable. Being betrayed while at my most vulnerable could have broken me. Instead, it had shown me my own strength, the loyalty of those who stood by me, and the power of refusing to surrender what matters most. The judge's ruling hadn't just saved my restaurant. It had affirmed something more important, that sometimes fighting for what's right actually works. That justice, while imperfect and slow, does occasionally prevail. That even in our darkest moments, we have more allies than we realize, and that was worth everything I'd been through. 1 year after the divorce, I stood in the newly constructed private dining room of Ember and Vine, surveying what we'd accomplished. The expansion had doubled our capacity while maintaining the intimate atmosphere that had made us successful. The wall of windows overlooked the herb garden, where we now grew many of our own ingredients, a project Carlos had championed during our recovery. Hard to believe where we were a year ago, Diane said, joining me with 2 glasses of champagne. Brain surgery, divorce papers, empty accounts. I accepted the glass, clinking it against hers. Sometimes I still wake up thinking it was all a bad dream. But it hadn't been a dream. The nightmare had been real, and so had the awakening that followed. The federal case against Adam Reeves had concluded 3 months earlier. He'd finally been extradited from Argentina and faced the music. 15 years for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The court had ordered restitution to all 7 restaurant owners he'd targeted, though the amounts recovered would never fully compensate for the damage done. Emma had testified against him, fulfilling her plea agreement. Her own legal consequences had been significant but not devastating: probation, community service, and financial penalties. Last I'd heard, she'd moved to Arizona to work at her cousin's dental practice, starting over far from the industry she'd helped Adam prey upon. The Portland restaurant community had not only rallied around Ember and Vine during our crisis, but had formed a more permanent alliance as a result. We'd established a support network for independent restaurant owners, sharing resources, warning each other about potential predators, and providing emergency assistance when needed. 3 other restaurants had already been saved from closure through our collective efforts. "Stop looking so serious," Diane chided. "This is a celebration, remember?" She was right. Tonight was the grand reopening, showcasing our expansion and new menu. We'd invited everyone who'd stood by us during the darkest days: loyal customers, supportive suppliers, fellow restaurant owners who'd lent staff or resources when we needed them most. "Where's Nathan?" I asked, looking for her oncologist boyfriend, who'd become a fixture in our lives. "Parking the car. He's bringing Brian and Tanya too." Brian Ellison had used his portion of the restitution from Adam's case to open a small catering business, rebuilding his career step by step. Tanya had moved back to Chicago as planned, but returned to Portland frequently to visit the friends she'd made during the case, especially Brian, with whom she'd developed a relationship that seemed to be healing them both. My phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. "Kitchen ready when you are, boss. This menu's going to knock their socks off." I smiled, texting back, "On my way," Let's show them what we've built." As I made my way through the main dining room toward the kitchen, I was stopped repeatedly by well-wishers, regular customers who'd been coming to Ember and Vine since we opened, industry colleagues who'd supported us during the crisis, even Judge Harmon herself, who'd accepted our invitation with a handwritten note saying she never missed an opportunity to see justice bear fruit. "Mr. Collins," she greeted me warmly, shaking my hand. "The restaurant looks magnificent, a phoenix risen from the ashes indeed." "I have you to thank for much of it," I replied. "Your rulings gave us the chance to survive." She waved away. "The gratitude. I merely applied the law. You did the hard part, refusing to be defeated even when it would have been easier to walk away." That was the lesson I'd carried forward from the ordeal. Not bitterness about Emma's betrayal or satisfaction from Adam's downfall, but the profound understanding that our response to catastrophe defines us more than the catastrophe itself. In the kitchen, organized chaos reigned as the staff prepared for the evening service. Carlos stood at the pass, calmly directing his team, making last-minute adjustments to presentations, ensuring every plate met his exacting standards. "We're ready," he said as I approached. "Best menu we've ever created." I surveyed the kitchen, the gleaming equipment, the focused staff, the beautifully plated dishes waiting to be served. This was what Emma and Adam had tried to destroy. This was what we'd saved, not just preserved but improved, expanded, strengthened. "Tell everyone to gather round," I said. As the kitchen staff assembled, joined by the front-of-house team, I looked at these faces, some who'd been with us from the beginning, others who'd joined during our recovery, all now part of something that transcended a mere business. "A year ago," I began, "many people thought Ember and Vine was finished. They looked at our circumstances, me in a hospital bed, our accounts empty, divorce papers served, and saw no path forward. What they didn't understand was that a restaurant isn't just a building or a bank account. It's the people who bring it to life every day." Nods and murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. "When I needed you most, you didn't just stand by me. You stood up for what we've built together. You worked extra shifts, deferred paychecks, talked to suppliers, reassured customers. You refused to let this place die." I gestured to the dining room beyond the kitchen doors, now filling with guests for our reopening celebration. Tonight isn't just about showing off our expansion or our new menu. It's about celebrating resilience, the kind that exists not in individuals alone, but in communities that refuse to let good things be destroyed by greed or malice. Carlos raised his water glass. "To Ember and Vine too. 0, better than ever." Everyone joined the toast, the moment of unity, a perfect prelude to the evening ahead. As they returned to their stations, Layla approached me. "There's someone asking. And for you at the bar," she said. "Says she's an old friend." Curious, I made my way through the bustling dining room to the bar area. Sitting alone at the far end was a woman I didn't immediately recognize. Mid-40s, elegant in a simple black dress, her expression uncertain as she spotted me approaching. It took another moment before recognition dawned. Rachel Wilson, the owner of Copper Pot in Seattle, Adam's first victim. We'd communicated by email during the case but had never met in person. "Rachel," I said, extending my hand, "I didn't know you were coming tonight." She smiled tentatively. I almost didn't. Feel strange to celebrate when my own restaurant is long gone. I sat beside her, signaling the bartender to bring us drinks. I know the feeling. For months after the divorce, I felt guilty about any moment of happiness, like I was somehow betraying the pain I'd been through. She nodded, understanding. "Exactly. But then I realized that staying miserable wasn't honoring what I'd lost. It was just giving Adam ongoing power over my life." "What are you doing now?" I asked. "Consulting for restaurant groups in Seattle. It's not the same as having my own place, but it keeps me in the industry I love." She took a sip of her wine. "And I'm working on a book about financial predators in the restaurant world, a guide for independent owners on how to protect themselves." "That's fantastic," I said, genuinely impressed. "The perfect way to turn your experience into something that helps others." Rachel's eyes swept the bustling restaurant. "You did that too, you know, not just with the support network you started, but by fighting back and winning. You changed the story for all of us." Before I could respond, Diane appeared at my elbow. "Speech time," she whispered. "Everyone's waiting." I introduced Rachel to Diane, promising to continue our conversation later, then followed my sister to the center of the main dining room, where a microphone had been set up. The room quieted as I stepped up to speak. Faces turned expectantly toward me. Staff members, loyal customers, industry colleagues, friends who'd become like family during the crisis. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began. "A year ago, I wasn't sure I'd still have a restaurant, let alone be celebrating an expansion. The journey from there to here hasn't been easy, but it's been illuminating." I paused, gathering thoughts I'd been formulating for months. When my wife served me divorce papers while I was still under anesthesia and emptied our business accounts, it would have been easy to view it as just a personal betrayal. But as the truth emerged about the larger scheme targeting restaurant owners, I realized something important. What happened to me, to us, was part of a pattern that thrives on isolation and shame. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Adam Reeves and others like him counted on their victims, feeling too embarrassed to speak out, too defeated to fight back, too overwhelmed to connect with others who'd been through the same experience. They weaponized our tendency to suffer, alone. I gestured to the gathering around me. But look at what happens when we refuse that isolation. Look at what we've built. Not just this expanded restaurant, but the network of support that's already helped save 3 other independent establishments. The legal precedents that make it harder for financial predators to operate. The community that stands ready to respond when one of us is threatened. I raise my glass. So tonight, we're not just celebrating Ember and Vine's survival and growth. We're celebrating the power of collective resilience, the understanding that when one of us is attacked, none of us stands alone. The applause was immediate and heartfelt. As I made my way through the crowd afterward, accepting congratulations and well wishes, I caught sight of Rachel speaking with Brian and Tanya, 3 people connected not by choice, but by shared experience, now turning their individual tragedies into collective strength. The evening progressed beautifully. The new menu Carlos had created was a perfect balance of Ember and Vine signature dishes and bold innovations. The newly expanded space accommodated our guests comfortably, while maintaining the intimate atmosphere we'd always prided ourselves on. The staff moved with confidence and pride, each aware of their role in our rebirth. Around midnight, as the last guests were departing, Diane found me in my office, reviewing the night's receipts, a record-breaking evening by any measure. "Stop working," she chided, perching on the edge of my desk. "Tonight's a night to celebrate, not calculate." I smiled, closing the ledger. "Old habits, but you're right." I leaned back in my chair, taking in my sister's face, the person who'd been my rock through surgery, betrayal and recovery. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, you know." "Yes, you could have," she contradicted me gently. "You're stronger than you realize, Michael. Always have been. But I'm glad you didn't have to do it alone." That was the lesson I'd learned most profoundly, the false dichotomy between strength and vulnerability. True resilience wasn't about standing alone against adversity. It was about knowing when to lean on others and when to offer your own strength in return. "Come on," Diane said, pulling me to my feet. "The staff is having an after-party at Carlos's. They're expecting both of us." "Let me just lock up." I Agreed, grateful for the invitation. A year ago, I'd been too consumed by pain and betrayal to appreciate simple pleasures. Now I understood their value with newfound clarity. After Diane left to bring the car around, I made a final walk through the restaurant, my restaurant, saved from those who would have destroyed it, renewed by those who believed in its worth. The empty dining room held echoes of the evening's celebration, of countless meals shared, of a community that had risen to defend one of its own. As I switched off the lights, my phone buzzed with a text message, an unknown number, but the content made the sender immediately clear, saw the feature about Ember and Vine's expansion in Portland Monthly. Congratulations, I truly am sorry for everything. E. Emma. I stared at the message, uncertain how to feel. The anger had faded months ago, replaced by something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of detached understanding. She had made choices that nearly destroyed what I'd built, what I loved. But those same choices had ultimately led to a stronger business, a tighter community, a more authentic life. I typed a simple response. Thank you. I hope you're finding your way forward too. It wasn't absolution, but it was acknowledgement of the past we'd shared, the pain that had followed, and the separate paths we now walked. I didn't wait for a reply before pocketing my phone and locking the restaurant door behind me. Carlos's apartment was a short drive away, in a renovated warehouse in the Pearl District. When Diane and I arrived, the party was in full swing. Staff, members, their partners, and a few close industry friends, celebrating not just a successful reopening, but a journey of collective perseverance. The man of the hour, Carlos called as we entered, handing each of us a glass of champagne. To the boss who refused to give up. The toast brought cheers and raised glasses, but I shook my head. Not to me, I corrected. To all of us. Every person in this room played a part in saving Ember and Vine. This is a shared victory. The celebration continued into the early hours. At one point I found myself on Carlos's balcony, taking a moment of quiet reflection away from the festivities. The Portland skyline glittered before me, the city where I'd nearly lost everything now, the setting for an unexpected rebirth. Layla joined me, leaning on the railing beside me. "Penny, for your thoughts," she said, nudging my shoulder with hers. "Just thinking about how differently things could have gone," I admitted. "If Judge Harmon hadn't seen through Emma's claims, if you and the staff hadn't stood by me, if Tanya hadn't brought her evidence forward. But those things did happen," Layla pointed out, "because you fought back instead of giving up, because you built something worth fighting for." Her words resonated with something I'd been reflecting on throughout the evening, how our actions create ripples that extend far beyond our immediate circumstances. "The Restaurant Association is talking about using our case as a template," I told her, "creating a rapid response system for owners facing similar situations, legal assistance, emergency staffing, bridge financing." Layla smiled. "See, your fight is helping people you'll never even meet." That thought stayed with me in the weeks following our reopening. As Ember and Vine settled into its expanded operations, I found myself increasingly drawn to the broader implications of our experience. The restaurant owners' network we'd started had grown beyond Portland, connecting independent establishments across the Pacific Northwest. 2 months after the reopening, I received a call from a restaurant owner in Boise, someone I'd never met who'd heard about our story through industry channels. His partner had died unexpectedly, and their sous chef was attempting a hostile takeover, spreading rumors to suppliers and investors, creating artificial financial crises. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice ragged with exhaustion and grief. "Everyone says I should just sell and walk away, that fighting will just drain whatever resources I have left." "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I want to keep the restaurant," he said without hesitation. "It's what Lisa and I built together. It's her legacy as much as mine, but I don't know if I can do it alone." "You don't have to," I told him. Within 24 hours, our network had mobilized a Portland attorney familiar with restaurant law offering guidance, 2 chefs from Seattle willing to help with operations while he stabilized his team, a financial advisor specialized in restaurant accounting reviewing his books. A month later, he called again. "We're back on solid ground," he reported. "The sous chef is gone. Suppliers are back on normal terms, and we're actually seeing higher numbers than before as the community rallies around us." "That's fantastic," I said, genuinely pleased for him. "None of it would have happened without your help," he continued. "When this is fully behind me, I want to do for someone else what you did for me. Keep the chain going." That concept, the chain of support, extending from one crisis to the next, each link forged by someone who had weathered their own storm, became the foundation for what we eventually formalized as the Restaurant Resilience Project. 6 months after our reopening, I found myself addressing a conference of independent restaurant owners in Seattle, sharing not just my personal story, but the practical lessons we'd learned about financial safeguards, legal protections, and community building. The most dangerous weapon used against us isn't financial manipulation or legal maneuvering, I told the gathered restaurateurs. It's isolation, the belief that we must face our battles alone, that asking for help is somehow a sign of weakness or failure. Rachel Wilson sat in the front row, copies of her newly published book stacked on a table beside her. Building Restaurant Resilience, Protecting Your Business from Predators and Disasters, had already become required reading for culinary school students and new restaurant owners across the country. The truth is that none of us succeed entirely on our own, I continued. Every restaurant represents countless interconnected relationships with staff, with suppliers, with customers, with the community. When those relationships are strong and reciprocal, they create a resilience that no individual predator can easily break. After the conference, Rachel and I had dinner at a small bistro owned by one of our network members. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she said as we shared plates of perfectly executed comfort food. "How different things might have been if we'd had this network when Adam first started targeting restaurant owners." I nodded, understanding her meaning perfectly. "If you had known about his approach to the Bayview Bistro owner, if Brian had heard about what happened to you and the copper pot." Exactly. Adam succeeded because we were isolated, because each of us thought we were facing a unique situation rather than a systematic predator. That insight led to the next phase of the Restaurant Resilience Project, a secure online platform where owners could confidentially report concerning behavior from potential investors, partners, or staff members. Not a blacklist, but an early warning system to help identify patterns before they resulted in disaster. By the 2nd anniversary of my surgery and Emma's betrayal, the landscape had changed dramatically. Adam remained in prison, his appeals exhausted. Emma had completed her probation and, according to mutual acquaintances, was slowly rebuilding her life in Arizona, now engaged to a dentist she'd met through work, apparently finding a more honest path forward. Ember and Vine had gone from recovery to thriving prosperity. We'd been featured in national publications, not just for our food and atmosphere, but for the community-building work that had grown from our crisis. The private dining room that had marked our first expansion was now regularly booked for Restaurant Resilience Project events, workshop dinners where established owners mentored newcomers in both culinary techniques and business protection strategies. 2 years to the day after waking up from brain surgery to divorce papers and emptied accounts, I sat in my office reviewing applications for our newest initiative, a grant program for restaurant owners facing unexpected crises, funded by a percentage of Ember and Vine's profits, and matching contributions from other successful establishments. Diane knocked on my open door, a small cake with a single candle in her hands. "Happy survival anniversary," she said, setting it on my desk. I laughed at the unconventional celebration. "Is this a thing now?" "Absolutely," she insisted, taking the seat across from me. "Some days deserve to be marked. Even if they're not conventionally happy occasions, the day you refuse to be destroyed is worth celebrating." As I blew out the candle, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years, from devastation to recovery to something that now looked remarkably like triumph, not the shallow victory of outlasting an opponent, but the deeper satisfaction of creating meaning from suffering, of building connections that transformed individual vulnerability into collective strength. Later that evening, as I walked through the bustling dining room of Ember and Vine, greeting regulars and newcomers alike, I caught sight of my reflection in the window, still recognizably the same person who had received those divorce papers, but changed in subtle, important ways, more thoughtful perhaps, more appreciative of the community around me, more aware of both my fragility and my resilience. Carlos emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "Table 7 wants to thank the owner personally. They're celebrating their 40th anniversary." I smiled, following him to a corner table where an elderly couple sat hand in hand, their faces illuminated by candlelight. "We've been coming here since you opened," the woman told me after congratulating them. "Watched everything that happened with that awful business last year. Never stopped believing you'd pull through." Her husband nodded agreement. "Some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds look bad. Our marriage taught us that. 40 years of ups and downs, but always worth the struggle." Their words stayed with me throughout the evening, echoing the lesson that had emerged from my own crisis, that value isn't determined by ease or comfort, but by what we're willing to endure to protect what matters to us. As I locked up that night, standing alone in the quiet restaurant that had nearly been taken from me, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for having survived the betrayal, but for everything that had grown from that painful soil. The strengthened bonds with my staff, the expanded vision of what Ember and Vine could be, the network that now protected and supported restaurant owners across the region. The judge's ruling that had saved my business had done more than restore financial justice. It had created the opportunity for a different kind of ruling, a personal commitment to transform betrayal into beneficence, crisis into community, pain into purpose. Standing at the threshold between the restaurant and the street outside, I took one last look at what we'd built and preserved. Emma's betrayal had been meant to end this story. Instead, it had become merely the difficult middle chapter in a larger, more meaningful narrative, one that continued to unfold in ways I could never have imagined from that hospital bed 2 years ago. I switched off the lights and stepped outside, locking the door behind me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to strengthen the networks we'd built, new chances to demonstrate that our worst moments don't have to define us, that, with the right support and the courage to keep fighting, they can instead become the foundation for our most meaningful contributions. That, I realized as I walked toward home through the quiet Portland streets, was the true verdict in this case. Not just that I had survived Emma's betrayal, but that something stronger, more authentic, and more valuable had emerged from the ashes of what was lost. A restaurant saved, yes, but more importantly, a community created, a purpose discovered, a life reclaimed, not despite trauma, but through the mindful transformation of it into something that served others. Some lessons come at an unconscionable price. But when we refuse to let those lessons die within us, when we instead share them, build with them, use them to protect others from similar pain, we convert that price into an investment whose returns benefit not just ourselves, but countless others we may never even meet. And in that transformation lies the most profound justice of all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.